Okay.
Hey Wargamers, we're here at the hobby desk talking about what's kind of been going on this last week or two, what's on the table, and how I am doing it. So also going into some games played afterwards. To let you all know, this last week well actually 2 weeks I guess, I have been painting like a madman to get my Orcs and Gretchen ready. If you don't know, I received an early copy of the game Speed Freaks, which I put a review out on Saturday, but basically, I was working on kill teams. I was like, hey, let's get this orc kill team painted. I think that's what I talked about last time. And then I got the announcement that that box was on its way for me, which was not expected at all. I didn't expect any 40k stuff. And so it just really got my hobby juices pumped. And I was like, okay, we're going to do this. I'm going to ride this out. And then I immediately painted up, I think, just shy of 60 boys. So now I have basically 2 max squads of orc boys with all kinds of weapons attachments, all kinds of stuff like that. That took up a lot of my hobby time. That was actually most of last weekend. And so I wanted to get that out of the way so that when the Speed Freak box came, I could just really dive into it. I wanted to have everything built so I could take pictures of it for the review. And it ended up being pretty great. Those 2 buggies take a lot of time to assemble. I'm going to be honest with you. There's a lot of pieces to them and they're all over the sprue. So it's kind of like Where's Waldo when it comes to where's the muffler and all that kind of stuff like that. At this point, what I'm trying to do is kind of clear off my hobby desk. Really, I want a fully painted, basically, project for every game system that I'm in. So, Slaves to Darkness is really great for Age of Sigmar right now. Iron Jaws are obviously pretty close there. I don't have quite 2,000 points yet. And then I want to have my 40k stuff ready to roll here pretty soon. To be honest, in the future, I might be selling off the Iron Jaws pretty soon. I'm not quite sure. I haven't decided. The reason for that is, I thought this before, but I really have, since I walked away from my Chaos Army, fallen in love with them again. Where I'm just like playing Iron Jaws. I'm like, but I want to be playing Chaos. I want to be playing my Slaves to Darkness. And so I love the models, and I do love the paint scheme that I ended up on. It's just not resonating with me as an army, which is fine. You know, I'm getting older, my tastes change. I don't want to trade anymore. I don't want any more models. So those resources would go straight into like buying terrain for kill team and skirmish battle reports, which I want to do at the new place. So yeah, on the topic of Orcs and Iron Jaws, I've actually gotten a lot of requests on how to paint the orc skin that I do, because it's a very bright orc skin, and some folks really love it. And so if you're curious, what I do is I take a base coat of Deathworld Forest as the bottom color. I use the not primer, but I don't know, the bottom layer. And then give it a wash of Athonian Camo Shade, which is like magic. I love that wash. And then it's just simply one thin down layer of Elysian Green. That's all there is to it. There's nothing special about it. For really large open areas like the top of the head where it's just bald or like that, or the top shoulder muscles, do a second layer of Elysian Green. But honestly, that's pretty much it. Just don't go into the cracks and crevices and let the Athonian Camo Shade sit there, and it looks great. And so my paint, I don't know, method, I call it, is 3 Foot Fabulous. They look fantastic. Just last night I saw all 60 of them on the table. And even though I was pulling them off by the handful, they looked great while I was doing it. So I had a lot of fun with that. If you're on YouTube watching this, I'll be throwing up a bunch of pictures of the army, so you can take a look at. But if you're on the podcast, just know, if you can head over to Instagram and check out the stuff that's over there, you can see the kind of green that I'm talking about. As far as what I'm painting next, the big things here, I still have some Fire Slayers to finish for Jack from Rerolling Ones, but he wanted a different scheme than what I was doing, so it kind of, part of the quick painting that I can do is that I kind of figure out a method and then rapidly go through that. And so he wanted to change the method, get some different colors, so it kind of stalled out the plan there, which is great because they look super dope. It just had to relearn what I was doing to get it to look right, but back up and running now. Figured out what colors he wants, so we're going to crank out a bunch of Fire Slayers. I think there's only like 12 or 13 models left, so that's pretty cool. And then pretty much after that, we're going to be moving pretty soon. We move into the new place November 11th, so that's when officially I will have a new studio I'm very excited about. So from there, I don't know, it's going to take a little bit of time to get everything reset up again, but when I do, there's going to be a lot of terrain going on because, like I said, Kill Team and Age of Sigmar Skirmish are going to be huge parts of this channel very, very soon. Hopefully with no delays. So that is kind of what's up on the future here. Now I want to talk about some games played. Because I played 2 games. Unfortunately, they were Age of Sigmar, but we're all kind of priming for the Firestorm campaign, going at rerolling ones. So it's kind of a lull before the storm. Firestorm, if you will. And so the games that I played, one was 40K last night, and the other one was Kill Team about a week ago. Just shy of a week ago. And I had a great time with both of them. We're going to start with the Kill Team game, because I have to go to my notes for it. And then I can talk about the game I had last night. So the Kill Team game was against Ben, who is an awesome friend of the show. And we played a narrative mission called Marked for Destruction. Basically, it's an attacker and defender mission. And the defender gets to put out 3 objectives, all within a kind of small, I think it's 5 or 6 inch radius of the dead center of the board. And the attacker has to destroy them in melee by the end of the game. I didn't see where it said you had to destroy them in melee, but Ben interpreted it that way, so that's what we went with. Now, if the attacker destroys 0 to 1 of those markers or whatever they're protecting, then the defender wins. If he destroys 2, then it's a draw. And if he manages to destroy all 3, it's a win for the attacker. So the attacker has to be very aggressive about what he does, because he's got to at least get 2, but you really want 3 because he wants to end on a draw. And so the way the board is set up, it has the a defender in the dead center, and the attacker can pretty much just go in the 4 corners. So it kind of really splits his force up. And it has a variable length, I think it has 4, 5, or 6 turns, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it's 5 or 6. 5 or 6 turns, I think. And so to describe the forces, Ben's force, he used Space Marines, and he had a bunch of scouts. I think he had 9 scouts, if I'm not mistaken. I believe 2 had sniper rifles. 1 had a heavy bolter. That might not be accurate, so if it's an illegal list, don't worry about it. It's just my recollection. I know one of them was a comms dude. One of the combinations he had was the comms giving bonuses to the heavy bolter guy, and the heavy bolter guy just laying waste because of these stratagems, or whatever they're called, in Kill Team that they can use, and it was pretty brutal. So that's kind of a general idea. It was all scouts, that same profile over and over again. And they were pretty, I wouldn't say they were elite per se, but they were up there. And the opponent, which was of course me, here's the thing, I'm limited by my model collection. I decided when I picked up the orcs about a month ago, I'm not making any purchases until the codex comes out. And so I stood by that. And so the problem is all I have is boys and Gretchen and a few knobs. And so my list was 1 boss knob, because that's the max you can take, 7 Gretchen, and 11 boys. So I had a full total of 19 models on the table, which we're going to talk about is a terrible idea. So as far as deployment goes, we rolled off. I got the defender, and so I was in the center. I had to jam-pack almost 20 models into that little bubble that was full of terrain and stuff like that. It was actually very difficult. The scouts were set. He had at least 1 scout in each corner, but in the bottom left corner, from kind of my vision, he had a bunch of them. So he had a heavy bolter, he had the comms guy, he had his heavy sniper dude, and so there was just a lot of mass in this one particular corner. A lot of his fighting power was in that corner. And so my plan was, as I'm seeing this kind of develop, I have so many more drops than him, I can really react to whatever he does. Rather than sitting and castling and defending the objective, I'm going to bull rush that corner. I'm going to pin down those elements because I don't think that the other disparate dudes have enough, I don't know, gumption to destroy the objectives. And I can deal with those. I can shoot at them on their way in. And so turn 1, I just go hog wild. Our first turn, we didn't realize, or I didn't realize, that you can actually move even if you fail to charge. If you roll a 7, you need a 10, you can still move 7 inches. So that kind of stunk. But was very aggressive, moved that entire flank out, and basically just saturated those guys with targets. Everyone else is kind of repositioned to get into good firing lanes to kind of prep for the other scouts who would be moving in. A lot of shooting back and forth. I know Ben had a field day just opening up that heavy bolter because there's all kinds of, like I said, tactics and things like that to give him bonuses. It was unbelievable. And so he pretty handily took out, or flesh wounded, I think 5 orcs in the first turn. And then on turn 2, the casualties really started to pile up. The boss knob went off on his own to kill one of the dudes in those random corners. Like I said, he put at least one guy in every corner, but the 4th corner was really heavily loaded because he was going to use that as his primary distraction / get in there unit. Turn 3 comes around, and I have suffered some extremely heavy losses. I think at one point I was down 7 dudes. The reason this matters is because he does manage to break my army, and everyone has to take nerve tests, with each flesh wound or casualty being a negative modifier to that. So I reached a point in turn 3 where it was impossible for the rest of the game for my army to do something, because basically they all got shaken. If you fail your nerve test, you shake and you just kind of freeze up and don't do anything. So my entire army at that point was shaken, and would be so for the rest of the game. And so here's the thing. We kind of reached this point where, this is more kind of a recap here. I ended up winning that game. And the reason is because I pushed so aggressively outward that in the 1 to 2 turns remaining, even though my models couldn't move, shoot, or do anything, Ben could not get to an objective and do enough damage to it to actually destroy one. Not even one. And so that was actually kind of cool. I was so aggressive. I was joking last night at the game store, and I was like, I stuffed him so hard in the locker, he just couldn't get out. Which I think is how you're supposed to play orcs. It's a very objective-based thing, I think, just because of the number of models they can put out. And so it ended up being a lot of fun. What we did realize is it got... I'm never going to take that many models again. It's a terrible idea. I'm going to do some more elite stuff, or at least proxy elite things, so I can get it down to more of the 12-ish region. Mainly because when that happens, that locking moment happens where it becomes impossible to pass a nerve test. It stopped being a 2-person game, and it was just Ben playing the game. And he laughed about that. We had a great time. It was a lot of fun. But we laughed about how he's like, I feel like I'm the only one playing. It's like, well, you kind of are. Now, of course, there is a stratagem that allows you to auto-pass a nerve test, which I did use every turn after that to try and get... I had at least one boy walking around doing something. Like I had a boy with a big shooter blow a scout marine head off as he came around a corner. That was pretty cool. So I did get some kills on him, but nothing enough really to weigh him down. And it just kind of became, he ran out of time. Which, you know, it's a narrative mission. That's the kind of stuff that happens sometimes. It's like, not only can you win, but can you do it in a time frame. That's kind of cool. As far as what I thought about the game itself, first of all, love Kill Team. It's a lot of fun. I love how quick it is. Once we knew what was going on, we were just really going through stuff. I think a lot of the depth of it is going to be getting past those initial games and learning the tactics of each individual dude and army. And that's going to be the real meat and potatoes, because when you start stacking those things on, that's when stuff gets interesting. Like using the Gretchen meat shield thing was a lot of fun for my my boss knob. He was cool. Another thing, and I've heard this on what podcast? I think it was Preferred Enemies, maybe. They were talking about some of the missions in Kill Team and how the ones that have attacker versus defender can be a bit stale. And the reason I tend to agree with that is because one way I could have gone was just to stay put and have 19 dudes stand around the objectives, and he would have never had a chance to get near them anyway. And that would have been extremely boring. It's not something I would ever do, so that's why I was very aggressive and went down his throat and just clogged his face with Gretchen and boys. But truthfully, it is true that I could have just sat there and done nothing and made my opponent do all the work. Whereas objectives where, you know, there's these points across the battlefield and we're both trying to get all of them, it's a lot more interactive, I would say. And so that would end up being a lot more fun. I try to get close to 11 to 12 models, I think, is probably the max that I kind of want to go. I want to do a lot of commandos who get bonuses to negative hits and things like that. And we were having this discussion last night where somebody was asking why would I take commandos over boys, because boys seem to be the big thing because you stick a lot of them in there. But in the Commando's case, being more expensive is actually a boon because you're still using points, but you don't have the liability of nerve tests and things like that when those boys get hurt. So I think it's good. I think Commando's the way to go, to be perfectly honest with you. With most, I think boys have a good place, and Gretchen certainly do with the being in the meat shield and the higher ballistic skills. But I think Commandos are just better in a lot of ways and in a lot of circumstances. That was my kill team game with Ben. So moving into my 40k game last night with Max. Had a great time. He brought Death Guard. We played at 1,000 points, and we just did the open war cards, where the mission was, I have an objective, he has an objective, there's one in the center, and you get a point for holding it, and you get 3 points if you hold it more turns in a row. Basically, my list was pretty much just, I tried to stick to the stuff that I had painted. And so I had 60 boys, a war boss, a weird knob, or a weird boy, I think they're called in 40k, 3 Def Coptas, and 3 Killicans, and that was my list. And he had a bunch of stuff, you know, Nurgle stuff has crazy names, but he had one big unit of the Plague guys, the basic Death Guard guy, Plague Marines, I'm sorry, and then 2 units of cultists, and a Demon Prince that he customized, which looks great. A few of their vehicles, like the little guys. One's like he calls it a flesh mower, and one is the little mini tank they have, and that was pretty much it. There's a few random heroes to give buffs, but really what he was going for was this synergy thing that you can do if you go to the Death Guard like 1d4 Chan page. Basically, you can stack hero abilities and stratagems to make their grenades go insane. The Death Guard Plague Marine grenades, you can get just like a bajillion d6 hits out the nose and wounds, and it's sick. All kinds of rerolls. I think at one point he did like 25 wounds to my boy unit. Just wiped them out with this grenade trick. So go check that out if you're interested, because I don't know the names of the specific heroes and things like that. But basically that was his list, that was mine. Just very standard deployment. I'm on one side, he's on the other. And so he basically did what Death Guard did, which is they just moved up, plopped on the objective, and just asked if I could come dislodge them. And the truth of the matter was, I just couldn't. I did some pretty terrible rolling early on in the game when it came to charges, and so I just couldn't get there. I think I rely too heavily on the jump, which is probably an accusation you can level against most orc players. Just at the current state with not having stratagems and things like that until the codex comes out. That's kind of a thing. But yeah, I had one unit of boys go straight up at the Death Guard unit, but they couldn't quite make it, so to contest the objective they were on, I had them go into something else so I can like throw a boy over there. And then the second group went all the way behind him and tried to charge from the back, but they kept failing everything. And then let's see, turn 2, the Def Coptas came in, and they swing so hard. They're either like MVPs or they're terrible, and today they were terrible. Because my last game I played against Ben with his 1,000 Suns, they were incredible. And so, yep, that's fine. They're a swingy unit, but they're cool, and I like them. So this game they didn't do a whole lot to help. That's okay. And then the Killicans came in behind. Once everything was pretty much dead because they move a little bit slower, they can't run and charge because they don't have the boys keyword. And kind of came up, and by the end of that point, he had, because you get more bonus points for holding an objective longer, and because he sat on his objectives so well for 3 turns, there was no way for me to catch up, and we shook hands. Highlights, though, were he got his grenade trick off twice and just decimated my army twice. And on my end, I had my weird boy do smite on a unit of cultists, and rolled for the super smite, and then rolled 6 mortal wounds, and they failed their test, so he just one-man deleted an entire unit, which is really cool to see. And that's pretty much it. I'm still learning the nuts and bolts of 40k, for sure. I definitely enjoy painting and modeling the orcs more than I've had a chance to play them. And so, yeah, I've just been doing a lot of hobby work, and I'm going to be trying really getting some games in here pretty darn soon. So that pretty much concludes the hobby desk for the week, I think. And if you are interested in seeing pictures of me and this stuff as it's happening, head over to Instagram. It's in the description down below. And then you can follow me there. Hey Wargamers, Doug here. And I know that you've been looking for ways to save money with your hobby. The best way to do this is by magnetizing your miniatures. Buy fewer models, increase the number of options you have in your units. While there are several magnet vendors online, only one of them was specifically tailor-made for wargamers, MagSavvy. MagSavvy magnets have their polarities clearly marked, so you never accidentally end up with that arm repulsing the torso situation that we get sometimes. And it makes magnetizing an entire unit or army a breeze by ensuring that every single weapon works for every single model. You get more, you pay less, and you can get busy gaming, which is what we're here about. So head over to 2Plus Tough for more details. Currently only available in the US, but coming overseas very soon. Hey Wargamers, thank you so much for watching that video. Be sure to hit subscribe and click the little bell notification icon so you're alerted to all new videos coming out.